Hello, welcome everybody to Introduction to Sociology. And this is just a little assignment tutorial to help you prepare for the assignment and hopefully to give you a little bit of guidance. So, firstly, make sure that you've actually gone through the full online course and any suggested reading, any additional resources. So, do your studying first before you start taking this, because there's a fair bit of theory that you're going to have to write about. So make sure you've gone through the course, done your reading, have a look at your notes, and especially look up any notes you've made on things like the key concepts for sociology and the key perspectives for sociology. They are two different things. I'll remind you of that in a minute in the tutorial. But just make sure that you're quite familiar with them and can be prepared to talk about them. Okay, so the assignment is split up into two tasks. There's task one, which is the essay, and task two, which is a presentation, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. So the first part of it is basically an academic essay, and it requires you to write an essay of 1,200 words maximum, give or take 10%. And this is the following title. It's quite a long title. So, sociology is united by a set of key concepts and concerns which characterize the study of society, but divided by the theoretical interpretation of these concepts and concerns. So discuss this statement with reference to three of the major sociological perspectives. There's quite a lot going on in there. So I've sort of split it up, highlighted it into different colours, hopefully so you can sort of think of it in bits, really. Hopefully that will help. So, sociology is united by a set of key concepts. So, in the pink area, we're actually thinking about what those key concepts are, and you're going to have to give me a little bit of an overview of some of them. Now, there's quite a few of them, so you can't write about them all. You're going to have to gauge how many you can write about, depending on your word count, really. But it's divided by a theoretical interpretation. So once we've looked at your key concepts, you're going to have to apply some of the major perspectives on them as well. So let's get into that a little bit more. Okay, first of all, I've listed probably most of the key concepts, not most, not all, but some of the ones that are generally talked about in Introduction to Sociology. Okay, then you can get some more in-depth ones later on. And I've identified culture, socialization, norms and values, social structure, social stratification, roles and status, identity, power, social control. Now, like I said, you're going to have to write a little bit about these, a little bit of analysis, what they are, maybe some of their strengths and weaknesses if you can. There's quite a lot there. You're not going to be able to choose them all, but as I said, you're going to have to work within your word count and see. But you want to do at least, I reckon you should do at least 3 of them. If you could do a couple more, that would be fine. But it's going to be how well you can summarize, how succinctly you can do a little bit of analysis. So what's it all about, really, when we talk about socialization? So go back, have a look at your notes on the key concepts. Give me a little bit of analysis about each concept that you're choosing to write about. Maybe, your analysis can be some strengths and weaknesses, positives, negatives, where they work, where they don't work, maybe what you've picked up from your reading. Okay. So, like I said, work out with your word count how many words you can use for looking at the key concepts, or maybe do about 4 or 5 of them, summarize them elsewhere in note form, and decide afterwards how many you're going to bring in. Okay, but I need for you to show to me that you know what they are, and you know how they're used in sociology when they're talked about, okay? And you know their relevance, whether they're effective or not, as a way of describing society or parts of society, okay? So you need to do a bit of research here. And therefore, if you're doing a bit of research, you need to keep some references, okay? So don't just use a reference of the online course, but try to bring in some from elsewhere as well if you can. You always get more marks if you bring in some references from elsewhere, as long as they're accurate references. So do check them, okay? So that's your key concepts bit. So you've got some notes about, say, you've picked culture, socialization, norms and values, just picking on the top three. So you've done a little bit of analysis about what culture is, about, you know, how useful it is when looking at society, what the strengths and weaknesses of that concept are. You've done the same with socialization, you've done the same with norms and values. You've explained to me what are norms, what are values, how they're used, okay? Few sentences. Again, it's about being brief, it's about summarizing, but you've got to be able to show me through what you've written. It can't be so thin that I don't really know how much you've understood, okay? So the next part is looking at the perspectives. Now, you've probably studied at least 3 of them. Some of us study more than that. But I've picked probably the 6 most well-known major perspectives. The top 3 are the most well-known: functionalism, conflict theory, which often used Marxism is often a well-known example of conflict theory, symbolic interactionism, which is a bit more complex. So make sure you get it straight in your head before you go on to discuss it. But you can use another one of these. I've got feminism, postmodernism, and the new right. Okay, and there's plenty of research on all of them, plenty of good descriptions for you to find. So you're going to apply this major perspective to your concepts. So I want you to choose it. You have to choose at least 3 of them and give an overview of what they are, of how they work. A little bit of an evaluation, maybe doing a compare and contrast with each other and how they use the focus words. And in this case, the focus words are the concepts. So you could do a compare and contrast in how they use socialization, say, for example, and how they use socialization in a way that it has a different meaning. So for functionalism, socialization would be like a very positive thing, part of the functionalist process, part of everybody being in place, doing the right thing, doing the thing that's expected of them. Okay, so that's very, you know, being well socialized is a positive thing. From the conflict theory approach, the idea of socialization can have quite a lot of negative connotations. It could be something that a conflict theorist believes is imposed upon certain people because of the difference in power structure. For the rich and the poor, Marxist, okay. So the rich people tell the poor people what to do and how to do it. And maybe the poorer people don't want to do it that way, but it's the rich guys who set the rules. Now, if you sort of agree with that, then you might want to write about conflict theory, okay? So as you can see, they are using something like socialization, but they use it differently, and that's where you can do your compare and contrast. The feminist view, quickly, sort of looks at socialization as a patriarchal thing, a bit like the conflict theorist. It's imposed upon women by men because men are always in power and women are sort of coming along behind. So they see it as, again, as an imposition. So again, they've got a different way. Symbolic interactionism is a whole different ball game, really. and looks at whether socialization is a symbol of what is right or what is wrong. So um, lots of different approaches for you to take. You've got to choose three, and you've got to do and compare and contrast. You can pick one concept or two concepts to contrast. I would probably use a couple just for you to throw it around. But remember, you've got to stick within your word count as well. Okay. So how do they use it differently? How do they interpret it? You could do norms and values. How does the postmodernist and the conflict theorists look at norms and values? Again, conflict theorists mostly think things are generally imposed because they haven't got any say, whereas some of the others will say, that people are part of society, and they're part of the decision making process. So do your research, read it, and apply your perspective to your concepts. Okay? If you're really not sure of all this, or if it boggles you a bit and you think, oh yeah, I'm not sure how you apply the two together, then you can always talk to me on WhatsApp and we can discuss it a little bit further. Okay, so a reminder that task one is an essay, as I said earlier. It's 1,200 words, give or take 10%. And do try to be tight to that, please, because you can lose marks. If you go way over, you will definitely lose marks. If you go way under, you won't have written enough, so you will lose marks. It's an academic essay, so it's fairly formal, written in third person. Okay, academic voice, please. There needs to be an intro, a main body of information, and a conclusion. The intro only needs to be a couple of sentences, and you're introducing the question that you're about to answer. Okay? The main body is where all your discussions of the concepts and the perspectives and your contrasts and comparisons, all of that is in the main body. All right, the whole discussion. The conclusion is just a summary of what you've been discussing, and it might, show any outcomes. We're not looking for recommendations here. It's not that sort of essay, really. It's just a sort of summary of, you bringing together all the things you've discussed into a few sentences. Remember, in a conclusion, nothing new, no new information in the conclusion, only just a summary of your main body of discussion. Okay, so I can pick it up that when you summarize it, it clarifies things in your head, and it make me clear about what you've been thinking about as well. It's an academic essay, so I need citations through the body of it all. Okay, and the standard reference list at the end, Harvard style. Please remember, if you can't remember how to do Harvard, you should have a Harvard guide. Do use it. Don't not use it. You will lose marks if you don't do it well. Okay, or if you don't follow the Harvard settings. I have to mark you down. Okay, so just remember that. Citations, the references are not included in the word count, so you can have as many references as you like. It doesn't really matter. It's only the body of the essay. It's only the main essay that is included in the word count. You don't need to put headings like that. You don't need to put a heading, intro, main body. I want it to flow like a proper essay, okay? But they are separate paragraphs. So the intro will be a paragraph. The main body will probably be several paragraphs, and the conclusion will be another paragraph at the end. Okay, but you don't need to head it up. I can work out what an intro and a discussion and a conclusion is. Okay, so hopefully that should help with task one. Okay, let's go on now to look at task two. So we put the essay aside. Okay, and now we're thinking about doing a presentation. In the sense of you're not actually doing this presentation to your whole class or everybody around you. It's not a live presentation. okay? But because it says you have to deliver one, I need to hear you verbally, as if you're actually doing it, sort of like I am at the moment. So you need to prepare and deliver a presentation on a social issue, and it needs to be a contemporary social issue. I don't want anything historical. I want something about the here and the now, okay? So you've got to do some recent research on a social issue that is of interest to you. You can choose any social issue that you like, okay? I've given you a little bit of a list, but you don't have to choose from that. You can if you want, it's fine. But if you've got another burning social issue that you want to write about, please do, but just make sure that you can answer the question with your knowledge of that social issue. Again, if you're really unsure, give me a quick WhatsApp. We can mill it over. So I've given you some ideas like cost of living, fuel poverty, homelessness, inequalities in education, inequalities in healthcare, knife crime, antisocial behaviour, child poverty. So I've given you a few major social issues, but again, if there's something that you feel quite strongly about, you're very interested in, please do that. Remember, you're not going to put a lot of information down. It is a presentation, but we'll go on to look at that. So once you've chosen it, um, whatever you choose, homelessness, say, I might use as an example. So once you've chosen it, then we go on to prepare the presentation. Do your research, and then but please follow this guidance. Please pay attention to this guidance and do what I'm asking you to do, because if you do too much, I'll mark you down. If you do too little, I'll mark you down as well, okay? So no more than 5 slides. So that's nice and clear. You've got 5 slides to tell your story within. And you can add notes pages, okay? But the notes pages need to be no more than 500 words, give or take 10%. So it's short, okay? The 5 slides need to have bullet points on them, not tons and tons of writing, because it's got to add up to 500 words. So you can see this is quite short and sweet. So the extra information is going to come from your verbal overview, a bit like I'm doing now. But again, I don't want you to go on for half an hour on that. Please, please. You've only got 5 slides. You really shouldn't need to talk for more than 10 minutes maximum. 5 to 10 minutes is fine, really. I'm sure that will cover enough. You're only looking at one issue. You need to explain the social issue that you intend to discuss. Why is it currently important? So give me an overview. One slide can give me an overview on the social issue. Why are you discussing it? Why is it important? Why have you chosen it? Okay. Why is it a big issue at the moment? And then you will need to apply 2 different sociological perspectives. Remember your perspectives: functionalism, conflict theory, symbolic interactionism, feminism, postmodern. Choose 2 of those to apply to this issue. And ensure that your presentation clearly explains how each of those 2 perspectives relate to your social issue. So you're applying it. So how do they interpret your social issue? Do they have a different view on it? This is another compare and contrast, okay? So say we're comparing functionalism again and conflict theory around homelessness. You're going to compare and contrast. So what do the functionalists feel about homelessness? I can give you a few clues. They generally feel it's the person's fault. They generally feel that someone hasn't done something correct, or that they haven't followed the social rules. They generally frown on homelessness. It doesn't sort of fit the sort of mold of the functionalist process. It doesn't fit into the system, homelessness. So they see it very much as a person's responsibility, and that maybe they're being deviant by being homeless. Okay. If you're a Marxist or any other, following any other conflict theory, then you would look very differently at homelessness. Again, you would look at it as a power issue, as as I sort of alluded to before. It's inequality. You would see that it's because of someone's situation, and that could be all sorts. It could be losing a job, and that wouldn't be their fault. It could be, so they would see it as something that's been done to you more, really, by the inequalities of the whole larger system. And that the fact, again, if you're going to go in the full Marxist way, the rich guys are in charge. If you're just one of the ordinary worker bees, the rich guys decide they want to sell their factory, make everybody redundant. You could become homelessness in times you can't find another job. Um, so they would say that it isn't always your fault, that these things can happen to you because of other people's decisions. So again, you've got a compare and contrast, a very different way of looking at the same issue. So you just need the one issue, as I said, and two different sociological perspectives. It works quite well if you find, if you have two that are quite different to each other. Like, I mean, the two classics are functionalism and conflict theory, because they go in such opposite ways that they're quite good to do a compare and contrast. But if you want to forward ahead and have a go with symbolic interactionalism and how they look at homelessness, or feminists, or the postmodern, or the new right is sort of very much similar to functionalism, but again, it's about what's acceptable. And again, they tend to blame the person who's homeless for being homeless in a way, because it's quite a right wing approach. So everybody should do their bit, everybody should pay their way. So they have a difficult view on benefits and things like that. So anyway, again, if you're a bit unsure, read over your stuff again. But if you want to debate anything, just do give me a quick WhatsApp and I'll talk it through with you. Okay, so that's a presentation, not more than 5 slides. The notes page, 500 words. So your slides and your notes page, 500 words. It's not a lot really. So you can give me a bit more detail with your verbals. Okay. So remember, as I said, keep the slides to bullet points. You need to show your referencing. So in your slides and your notes, you can put some citations. Okay, please do that. And at the end of your notes page, you can put a reference list as you did in your essay, because that won't be included in your word count. Reference lists are never included in your word count, so remember that. And you need to present, because it actually says that you have to present. So I need a voiceover at the very least. Okay, you can do it any way you like. You can do it the way I do here, which is basically a recording over my PowerPoint. Quite easy. You can use another system if you want, as long as it uploads okay. All right, so you can video stuff, but I need to see the slides and the PowerPoints, and your voiceover, really. So just think about how you're going to do that. Okay. Any questions? As I said, speak to me. But the important thing is to make sure that you've done your reading first, because it's be quite hard for you to organise this otherwise. So as an upload, when you've completed, you'll have 3 files. You'll have your academic essay, which hopefully will be a Word doc, please. Your slides, which are probably best if they're PowerPoint. And your notes page, which should be a Word doc as well, preferably. Okay, needs to hit by the hand-in date, please, and remember the rules. If you haven't asked for an extension, you could get marked down to a pass. Okay, nobody wants that. We all want to try and get merits and distinctions, really. So make sure it's all referenced. Please don't make that mistake of doing it so quickly you don't put your references on afterwards. Before you upload it, please run through the slideshow, make sure it sounds okay. I've had people upload things when on the second slide they sort of, go off and sort of talk to the wall behind them, and I don't hear what they're saying, so half the information gets lost. So it shouldn't take you that long. I said, really, if you're going to do a voiceover, it really shouldn't be more than 5 or 10 minutes because it's only 5 slides. Okay, 5 or 10 minutes, absolute max, really. And please, before you upload your essay and your notes pages, proofread them. Make sure there's no crazy spellos or typos or anything like that, because that's something you can really avoid. That can really help with your presentation marking. Okay, so all I have to say is good luck. So that's it, and I'll see you again for another one of the assignment tutorials on another unit. Okay, so good luck. Thank you.